Elias Morgan stood near the wide glass wall of the observation hall, looking out at the stars. The ship moved slowly through a calm stretch of space, and distant suns shone like quiet lanterns in the dark. He had trained for years for this moment, but now that it was here, his heart felt louder than the engines beneath his feet. The Aurelian homeworld waited ahead, glowing like a soft golden jewel in the distance. It was a place no human had ever walked before. Elias was not a soldier or a politician. He was a cultural ambassador, chosen because he listened carefully, spoke gently, and believed that understanding was stronger than fear. Behind him, a group of human diplomats spoke in low voices. They checked data screens, reviewed laws, and prepared formal greetings. Elias stayed silent. He believed that first contact should feel human, not mechanical. When the ship finally entered orbit, the planet filled the windows with its warm light. The Aurelians had built their cities like living art, tall curved towers that shimmered as if made from crystal and sunlight combined. The landing platform waited, smooth and wide, surrounded by soft, glowing plants that moved slowly, as if breathing. Elias took a deep breath as the doors opened. The air felt warmer than Earth's and carried a gentle hum like distant music. The Aurelians stood waiting in a wide circle. They were tall and graceful, their skin glowing faintly with patterns of light that shifted with their emotions. Their eyes were large and bright, reflecting the sky above them. At the center stood Queen Seraphine. She wore a long, flowing robe that seemed to be woven from pure starlight. A delicate crown floated just above her head, not touching her hair, held in place by a quiet energy field. She looked ancient and young at the same time, her face calm but curious. Elias stepped forward slowly, hands open to show he carried nothing. He had practiced his words many times, but in that moment he let them go. "I am Elias Morgan," he said simply. "I came to listen." A soft ripple of light moved across the Aurelians. The Queen's eyes narrowed just a little, not in anger, but in surprise. Most visitors spoke first about peace, trade, or power. No one had ever started with listening. Seraphine stepped forward. Her voice was smooth, like wind moving across water. "You are welcome, Elias Morgan. You stand before the Aurelian throne. Speak your purpose." Elias thought for a moment. Then he smiled, small and honest. "My purpose is to learn who you are." There was a pause. The air seemed to hold still. Then, to the surprise of everyone, the Queen smiled back. The formal meeting that followed took place in a wide hall filled with light. The walls glowed softly, showing moving images of Aurelian history. Great cities rising, stars being mapped, and generations of rulers standing in long lines of memory. Human leaders spoke of alliances, shared knowledge, and peaceful borders. Aurelian advisors responded with careful words, respectful but distant. Through it all, Elias watched the Queen. She listened closely, her eyes often drifting toward him instead of the speakers. When the talks ended, she raised a hand. "I wish to speak with the human listener," she said. The room grew quiet. Elias felt his heart skip, but he stepped forward. They walked together through a garden that floated above the city. Platforms of glowing stone drifted gently in the air, connected by bridges of light. Strange flowers opened and closed as they passed, their colors changing with the Queen's presence. "You do not speak like the others," Seraphine said. Elias shrugged lightly. "I think people show more of themselves when they're not being asked to prove something." The Queen considered this. "My people believe a ruler must always prove strength," she said, "even when alone." Elias sat on the edge of a floating platform, letting his feet dangle over the glowing city below. After a moment, Seraphine joined him. "On my world," he said, "we tell stories about leaders who were strong because they cared, not because they ruled." "Stories?" she asked. He nodded. "Would you like to hear one?" She did. So Elias told her a simple tale about a small village and a leader who walked among the people, helping them fix broken roofs and listening to their worries. He didn't use grand words or heroic battles. He spoke of quiet courage and shared meals and laughter around warm fires. As he spoke, the patterns of light on Seraphine's skin shifted slowly, glowing softer and brighter at the same time. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "My people record history," she said. "We do not tell stories like that." "Maybe history remembers what happened," Elias said. "Stories remember how it felt." Something in her eyes changed. From that day on, the Queen asked for Elias to walk with her often. They visited old Aurelian temples carved into floating mountains. They stood beneath massive star maps that showed paths across the galaxy. They watched young Aurelians practice the arts of light shaping and sound weaving. Elias shared human music through a small device he carried. Soft songs, hopeful songs, songs about loss and love and long journeys home. The Aurelians listened in wonder. Seraphine began to ask questions that no one else dared to ask. Why do humans make art even when life is difficult? Elias thought. Because it reminds us that we are more than our problems. Why do humans forgive those who fail them? Because we all fail sometimes. She walked beside him, her steps slow. My people do not forgive easily, she said. We preserve perfection. Perfection can be lonely, Elias replied gently. The words stayed between them like a quiet bridge. As weeks passed, whispers spread through the Aurelian court. The queen spent too much time with the human. She laughed more. The glow of her patterns changed in ways no one had recorded before. One evening, they stood on a high platform as two suns set at the same time, painting the sky in gold and violet. Seraphine looked at Elias. You are not like the others of your kind, she said. He smiled. They'd probably say the same about me. She studied him carefully. When I speak to you, I feel unguarded. That is not something a queen should feel. Elias met her gaze. Maybe it's something a person should. The word person seemed to surprise her more than anything else he had said. That night, Seraphine returned to her chambers and looked at the long line of glowing images of past queens. Every one of them stood alone, powerful, perfect, untouchable. For the first time in her long life, she wondered what it would feel like to not stand alone. Elias, back in the human guest quarters, wrote in his journal. He did not write about politics or treaties. He wrote about the way the queen's light changed when she laughed. He wrote about floating gardens and quiet conversations beneath the stars. He knew something important was growing, something that went beyond his mission. But he also knew that worlds were built on rules older than both of them. The next morning, Seraphine called for him again. This time they walked to the highest point in the city where the sky felt close enough to touch. There is something you must know, she said, her glow dimmed slightly. My people have a law, a rule that cannot be broken. Elias listened. If I ever form a bond beyond diplomacy with a being not of my kind, I must give up my throne. The words hung in the air like falling stars. Elias did not speak right away. Seraphine looked at him, not as a queen now, but as someone waiting to see if she would be understood. I did not tell you this to frighten you, she said. I told you because I trust you. Elias took a slow breath. Thank you for telling me, he said. They stood together in silence, the city glowing beneath them, the galaxy stretching endlessly above. Neither of them knew where this path would lead. But for the first time, two civilizations were not just speaking across the stars. They were listening to each other's hearts. The morning light on the Aurelian world always felt soft, like it was careful not to disturb anything. Elias stood on the balcony of the guest tower, watching the city below wake up. Platforms drifted into place, glowing bridges formed between towers, and the gentle hum of life filled the air like a quiet song. But his mind was not on the beauty. It was on the queen's words from the day before, a rule that could not be broken. He rested his hands on the railing and let out a slow breath. He had come to build peace, not to become a problem written into another civilization's history. Behind him, the door slid open. A human advisor named Myra stepped out. She had sharp eyes and a calm voice, and she had been part of more first-contact missions than Elias could count. You look like you didn't sleep, she said. I didn't, Elias replied. She leaned against the wall beside him. The queen called another meeting today. The council is nervous. Elias nodded. I understand why. Myra studied him for a moment. You're not just a listener anymore, are you? Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The grand council hall was full when Elias arrived. Aurelian elders floated slightly above the ground in a wide circle, their glowing patterns slow and steady. Human diplomats stood on one side, their screens and notes ready. Queen Seraphine entered last. The room fell silent. She took her place at the center, but her eyes found Elias almost immediately. There was no smile today, only something thoughtful and heavy. An elder spoke first. The human presence has brought change. Elias felt the word land like a stone. Change is not always a threat, Seraphine said calmly. Nor is it always safe, the elder replied. The discussion moved carefully, like stepping across thin ice. Trade routes, shared science, and cultural exchanges were debated, but beneath every word was the unspoken truth. The queen and the human. At the end of the meeting, Seraphine dismissed the council early. She stood and looked at Elias. "Walk with me," she said. They left the hall and moved through a quieter part of the city where fewer lights glowed and the air felt cooler. They reached a long bridge made of solid light that stretched over a deep space between towers. Halfway across, she stopped. "My people are afraid," she said. "Of me?" Elias asked softly. "Of what you represent," she replied. "You are a reminder that the galaxy is larger than our rules." Elias looked out into the open sky below them. "On my world, rules change when they stop helping people." Seraphine folded her hands. "On my world, rules are what keep us from falling apart." They stood there, two figures from two distant stars, balanced between past and future. Later that day, Elias was invited to a human strategy meeting. The room was small and quiet, filled with glowing screens showing Aurelian symbols and human translations. A human leader named Commander Hale spoke first. "We need to be careful. If the Queen steps down because of us, it could cause instability across her empire." Elias nodded. "I don't want to be the reason their world shakes." Myra leaned forward. "But what if their world needs to shake just a little?" The room fell silent. "We've studied their history," she continued. "Their system has never changed, not in thousands of years. No matter how advanced they are, they've never tried a new way of leading." Elias looked at the screen, showing a long line of glowing queens, each one identical in pose and power. "Maybe," he said slowly, "they don't need someone to break their rule." "Then what do they need?" Hale asked. Elias thought of Seraphine's eyes, the way they looked when she asked about forgiveness, about art, about people instead of perfection. "They need someone to show them a different choice exists." That evening, Seraphine invited Elias to a place few had ever seen. They traveled in a small floating vessel that moved silently through the air, passing beyond the main city into open sky. Ahead of them, a massive structure rose from a floating mountain. It was old, older than the city itself, carved from glowing stone and marked with symbols worn smooth by time. "This is where our laws were written," Seraphine said. Inside, the air felt still and heavy. Light flowed through cracks in the ceiling, painting the walls with shifting patterns. Images of ancient Aurelians were carved into the stone, their faces serious, their hands raised in symbols of duty and order. Seraphine walked slowly, her glow dimmer here. "I was raised to believe that my life belongs to my people," she said. "Not to myself." Elias followed her. "And do you believe that?" She stopped in front of a large stone panel showing the first queen standing alone beneath the stars. "I believe my people matter more than my comfort," she said, "but I am beginning to wonder if my people would be stronger if their queen was allowed to be whole." Elias did not step closer. He gave her space, as he always did. "On my world," he said, "leaders are chosen. They can be thanked, they can be criticized, and they can be replaced, but they are still allowed to be human." She turned to him. "And does that make them weak?" "Sometimes," Elias admitted, "but it also makes them real." The next few days brought visitors from across the Aurelian Empire. Delegates from distant stars arrived to see the humans for themselves. Some were curious, some were cautious, some were openly cold. Elias met them all the same way. He listened. He asked about their homes, their art, their children, their dreams. He shared stories of Earth's oceans, of rainstorms and mountain trails, of crowded cities and quiet nights. Slowly, something began to shift. Aurelian children followed him through the gardens, fascinated by his laughter. Artists asked to hear human music again. Scholars debated human ideas of shared leadership and peaceful protest. Seraphine watched it all from a distance, her glow bright and uncertain. One night, as stars drifted slowly across the sky, she joined Elias on the same floating platform where he had first told her a story. "My council believes you are changing my people," she said. Elias smiled softly. "I think your people were ready to change. I just happened to be here." She sat beside him, closer than before. "If I choose my throne," she said, "I lose something I did not know I was allowed to want." "If you choose yourself," Elias replied, "you risk everything you've protected for so long." They both looked up at the stars. "On my world," Elias added, "we believe the hardest choices are the ones that shape the future, not just the present." Seraphine closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her glow was steady, bright, and calm. "Then perhaps the future should not be decided by an old rule alone," she said. The next morning, a message spread across the Aurelian Empire. The queen would address her people. The grand plaza filled with light and life. Countless Aurelians gathered, their glowing patterns forming a sea of color. Human diplomats stood quietly at the edges, unsure what was about to happen. Seraphine stepped forward onto a high platform, her voice carried by the air itself. For generations, we have believed our strength came from never changing, she said. From standing alone, perfect and unmoved. Her eyes moved across the crowd. But I have learned from our human guests that strength can also come from listening, from sharing, from trusting others to walk beside us. Elias felt his heart pound. I will not break our rule, she continued, but I will ask my people a question that has never been asked before. The crowd glowed brighter. Should a queen stand above her people forever, or should she one day stand among them? Silence followed. Then slowly a ripple of light moved through the crowd, like the first sign of a coming dawn. Elias watched, knowing that whatever happened next would not just change one life. It would change the path of an entire civilization. The plaza stayed quiet long after the queen's question faded into the air. The Aurelians did not shout or cheer the way humans might have. Instead, their glowing patterns shifted slowly, like stars moving across the night sky. Elias felt the weight of the moment settle around him. Seraphine stepped back from the platform. Her hands trembled just a little, though she kept her posture calm. She had not given her people an answer. She had given them a choice. In the days that followed, the Aurelian world changed in small but visible ways. Public gathering spaces filled with discussion. Light displays formed in the sky, showing ideas instead of history. Scholars opened old records and compared them with human stories and systems of leadership. Families talked late into their rest cycles about what it meant to follow a ruler and what it might mean to walk beside one instead. Elias walked through the city, listening as he always did. An Aurelian artist told him, "We have always shaped light into perfect forms. Now we wonder what it would look like if light could change its own shape." A young student asked him, "If humans choose their leaders, does that mean anyone can dream of becoming one?" Elias smiled. "It means everyone can dream of helping their world in their own way." The questions kept coming, and with them, something like hope. But not everyone felt the same. In a quiet chamber beneath one of the tallest towers, a group of Aurelian elders gathered. Their light patterns were sharp and bright, showing tension instead of calm. "The queen risks breaking what has held us together for ages," one elder said. "She risks making us ordinary," another added. Their words moved through the room like cold wind. Meanwhile, Seraphine stood alone in her private observatory, staring out at the stars. The galaxy she ruled stretched farther than her eyes could see, yet she felt smaller than ever. Elias joined her quietly, as he often did. "You gave them something powerful," he said. "I gave them uncertainty," she replied. "Sometimes," Elias said, "uncertainty is where growth begins." She turned to him. "And what if they choose not to grow?" "Then they've still chosen," he answered gently. "That matters too." She looked at him for a long time, then nodded. Soon after, a message came from the elders. They demanded a formal trial of the queen's proposal. The great hall filled once more, but this time the air felt different. The space between the floating elders and the gathered citizens felt like a wide, unseen river. Seraphine stood at the center, not above them, but among them. An elder spoke. "You suggest a future where leadership is shared, where the queen is no longer alone at the top." "Yes," Seraphine said, "a future where the queen listens as much as she leads." Another elder turned to Elias. "And what role does the human play in this vision?" Elias felt every eye turned toward him. "I am not here to lead your people," he said calmly. "I am here to walk with them if they allow it." Murmurs of light rippled through the crowd. The elders withdrew to consider. While they were gone, Seraphine and Elias sat together on the wide steps of the hall. The glowing floor beneath them pulsed softly like a living heart. "Are you afraid?" Elias asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "But I am also hopeful," he smiled. "That's a very human feeling," she laughed softly. "Perhaps your world has already changed mine more than I realized." When the elders returned, their light patterns were slow and steady. "We will allow an experiment," the lead elder said. "A council made of many voices. A place where the queen will speak, not command." A wave of brightness swept through the hall. Seraphine closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, shining. The first stellar council was formed in the days that followed. Representatives from across the Aurelian Empire gathered, along with human observers. The council chamber was built as a wide circle instead of a throne room, with no single seat higher than the others. Elias took his place among them not as a ruler, but as a bridge. The early meetings were difficult. Some delegates spoke with anger, some with fear, some with excitement. Ideas clashed not in silence but in open light and sound. Elias helped translate not just language but meaning. When an Aurelian spoke of losing perfection, Elias reframed it as gaining possibility. When a human spoke of freedom, Elias explained it as shared responsibility. Slowly, the room learned how to listen. Outside the chamber, the city reflected the change. New art filled the streets. Music blended human tones with Aurelian light harmonies. Children played games that mixed both cultures, pretending to be star explorers and council speakers instead of silent rulers. Seraphine walked among her people more than ever. Without the high platform or the distant glow of untouchable power, she felt something new. She felt seen. One evening, she and Elias stood at the edge of a floating lake, where the water reflected the stars above and the city below at the same time. "My people used to look at me and see only the queen," she said. "Now some of them look at me and see Seraphine." Elias nodded. "That's a powerful thing. But not everyone is happy," she added. As if to prove her point, a group of elders approached, their light sharp and focused. "You are changing too quickly," one of them said. "Our people are confused." "Confusion is not destruction," Seraphine replied calmly. "It is the space between what we were and what we might become." The elder turned to Elias. "And if we become something we do not recognize?" Elias answered softly. "Then you will have the chance to choose who you want to be." The elders left, their glow dim but thoughtful. That night, Seraphine and Elias sat in the old law temple again, beneath the stone image of the first queen. "I used to believe this place held all our answers," Seraphine said. "Now I think it only holds our beginnings." Elias looked at the carving. "Every story has a first page, but it's the chapters after that make it worth reading." She turned to him, her light warm and steady. "There is still the rule," she said. "I have not broken it." "And you don't have to," Elias replied. "You've changed what it means to lead instead." She smiled. "You humans are very good at finding paths around walls instead of through them." He laughed. "We build a lot of walls, we get plenty of practice." As the Stellar Council grew stronger, messages spread across the empire. Other worlds began forming their own local councils, inspired by the Queen's choice. Some resisted, some embraced it, all talked about it. The galaxy was listening. One day, a young Aurelian child approached Elias in the gardens. "Are you a ruler?" the child asked. Elias knelt down. "No." "Are you a hero?" Elias thought for a moment. "I'm just someone who listens." The child considered this, then smiled brightly. "I want to be that too." Elias felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with sunlight. Later, Seraphine found him watching the sunset. "You have given my people a new kind of dream," she said. He shook his head. "They found it themselves, I just helped them hear it." They stood side by side, close but not touching, as the sky filled with gold and violet. The rule still existed. The future was still uncertain. But between a queen who chose to listen and a human who chose to stay, something stronger than law was growing. Trust. And across the stars, that trust was beginning to shine like a new constellation, guiding two worlds toward a shared tomorrow. The sky above the Aurelian capital glowed with soft colors as the day began. Light flowed through the air like gentle waves, reflecting off towers and floating bridges. The city no longer felt like a place of silent perfection. It felt alive in a new way, filled with voices, music, and movement. Elias stood on a wide balcony overlooking the central plaza. Below him, Aurelians and humans walked together, sharing stories, art, and small moments of laughter. Children chased glowing light shapes across the open space, their joy rising into the air like a song. The stellar council chamber behind him hummed with quiet energy. Today was not just another meeting. Today was a turning point. Seraphine approached from the far end of the hall. She did not wear the floating crown anymore. Instead, she wore a simple robe that shimmered gently, not with power, but with warmth. Her glow was steady and calm, like a star that had found its place in the sky. "You are early," she said. "I didn't want to miss anything," Elias replied. She smiled. "Neither did I." The council chamber filled slowly. Representatives from across the Aurelian Empire took their places in the wide circle. Human observers sat among them, no longer at the edges, but woven into the gathering. The lead elder stood. "For ages, our people have followed a single light," the elder said. "Today we stand in many lights, and we must decide how they will shine together." Seraphine rose from her seat. "My people," she said, her voice carrying gently across the room, "I was raised to believe my purpose was to stand above you, to protect you by never becoming one of you." She looked around the circle. "But through this council, through our human friends, I have learned that protection can also come from standing beside one another." A soft ripple of light moved through the chamber. "There is still a rule that binds me," she continued, "a rule that says a queen must stand alone." Elias felt the familiar weight of those words. "I will not break this rule," Seraphine said, "but I will fulfill it in a new way." The room grew quiet. "I stepped down from the throne today," she said. A wave of light surged through the chamber, not in fear but in surprise and emotion. "I do not step away from my people," she added. "I step toward them." The lead elder bowed slowly. "Then who will lead us, Seraphine?" She turned and gestured to the wide circle. "You will lead yourselves together." The council did not erupt in chaos. It did not fall into silence either. Instead, voices rose, careful at first, then stronger. Questions, ideas, and hopes filled the space. Elias watched as something incredible happened. The Aurelians did not look to one figure for answers. They looked to each other. Later that day, the city gathered in the Grand Plaza. Light filled the air as far as the eye could see. Seraphine stood at the center, not on a high platform, but on the same ground as everyone else. "My people," she said, "I was your queen, today I am your speaker." The word felt new, and it felt right. "My role is no longer to command," she said. "It is to listen, to guide, and to carry your voices across the stars." The crowd glowed brighter than Elias had ever seen. After the gathering, Elias and Seraphine walked through the floating gardens, where soft light flowed between glowing plants and gentle water streams. "You gave up everything," Elias said quietly. "I gained something instead," she replied. "A future my people can build together." They stopped at the edge of a platform, looking out at the wide sky. "There is still the rule," Seraphine said. Elias nodded. "And you honored it." "I did," she said, "but I also changed what it means to stand alone." She turned to face him. "Elias Morgan, listener of worlds," she said softly, "will you walk beside me, not as a symbol, not as a bridge, but as a partner?" Elias felt his heart rise into his throat. He took a slow breath. "I will," he said. Their bond was not marked by crowns or laws, it was marked by choice. The announcement spread across the stars. The former queen of the Aurelians had stepped down and formed a bond with a human. The empire had not fallen. It had transformed. Other worlds watched closely. Some feared, some hoped. Many began to ask their own questions about leadership, tradition, and change. A new alliance formed, not ruled by one species, but guided by many. The wedding took place beneath an open sky, where stars drifted slowly like silent witnesses. There were no thrones, no platforms, no lines between guests. Humans and Aurelians stood together in a wide circle. Music filled the air, blending human instruments with Aurelian light harmonies. The sound felt like a promise carried on the wind. Seraphine wore a robe that shimmered like the night sky. Elias wore a simple suit, his hands steady but his eyes bright. They did not speak long vows. Seraphine said, "I choose to listen." Elias said, "I choose to stay." The crowd glowed, laughed, and cried in their own quiet ways. In the days that followed, the stellar alliance began to grow. New species reached out, curious about the world where a queen had stepped down for her people, and a human had helped her rise in a different way. Elias traveled often, not as an ambassador of Earth alone, but as a symbol of shared worlds. Seraphine spoke at councils across the stars, carrying stories instead of commands. They became known not as rulers, but as guides. Years passed. The Aurelian children who once followed Elias through the gardens grew into council members, artists, and explorers. Human children learned Aurelian light songs in schools. Star maps began to show not just borders, but paths of cooperation. One evening, Elias and Seraphine stood on a quiet platform far from the city, watching a new star being born in the distance. "Do you ever miss the throne?" Elias asked. Seraphine smiled. "I used to stand above the galaxy, now I stand within it. I would not trade that for anything." Elias reached for her hand, and she took it. Far below them, lights from countless worlds shimmered like a sea of stars. Their story became more than a tale of love. It became a lesson passed down through generations. That strength could be shared. That rules could guide, but people could grow. That even across the vast silence of space, understanding could be louder than fear. And somewhere in the endless galaxy, whenever two worlds met for the first time, Someone would remember the human who chose to listen and the queen who chose to step down. And they would believe, just a little more, that the future could be built together.